For thousands of years, the most advanced civilizations on the planet believed something that modern self-help got completely backwards. They believed your darkest feelings, your rage, your jealousy, your shame, weren't flaws to fix. They were sacred, necessary even. And if you spend your whole life trying to bury them, you don't become a better person, you become a smaller one. There's an old ceremony from ancient Egypt involving a scale, a feather, and a monster that devours souls who fail the test. And what that test was actually checking for is something almost nobody understands today, even people who've read every shadow workbook on the shelf. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, that scale is going to make a lot more sense. So is every uncomfortable feeling you've been trying to push down. Somewhere along the way, we all got handed the same advice. Stay positive, don't dwell on the negative, choose happiness. On the surface, that sounds harmless, helpful even. But here's what actually happens. Picture someone who gets passed over for a promotion. They're furious. But they were raised to believe anger is ugly, so they swallow it. They smile in the meeting. They say no worries, next time. And then that night, they snap at their partner over something tiny, a dish left in the sink, a comment about dinner. That's not a coincidence. That's the emotion finding a different exit. Suppressed feelings don't evaporate. They just change shape and come out somewhere else, usually somewhere it doesn't belong. But here's where things get interesting. A psychologist figured this out almost 100 years ago, and he gave this hidden part of us a name that's become one of the most searched concepts in modern psychology. Carl Jung called it the shadow, and no, it doesn't mean some evil twin living inside you. It just means the parts of yourself you've disowned. The traits you were taught were unacceptable, so you pushed them out of sight. For one person, that might be anger. For another, raised to be tough and never show weakness, the shadow might actually be softness or grief or the need to be taken care of. Jung's point was simple. Whatever you refuse to look at doesn't disappear. It just operates without your permission. This is why shadow work has become such a massive topic. People are realizing that the emotions they've spent years avoiding are exactly the ones running their lives from behind the curtain. But here's where things get interesting. Jung didn't invent this idea. He just put a modern label on something civilizations were already working with thousands of years before psychology existed. In ancient Egypt, order and chaos weren't just abstract ideas, they were personified. Ma'at represented truth, balance, and order, the force that kept the sun rising and the Nile flooding on schedule. Opposing her was Isfet, chaos, disorder, everything unpredictable and uncomfortable. The easy assumption is that Ma'at was the good guy and Isfet was the bad guy, like some kind of cosmic superhero story. Order wins, chaos loses, roll credits. And this is where most people make a mistake, because that's not how the Egyptians saw it at all. The Egyptians didn't believe Isfet could be destroyed. Not by gods, not by pharaohs, not by anyone. Chaos was permanent. It was always pressing against the edges of order, every single day, forever. So the goal was never elimination. The goal was balance. Every morning the sun god had to fight off chaos just to rise again. Every year the pharaoh's job was to hold Isfet back, not erase it from existence. Now think about your own anger, jealousy, or fear for a second. What if those aren't problems to solve once and for all? What if they're more like Isfet, forces that never fully go away, where the real skill is learning to hold the line, not win the war? Now this next part might surprise you, because the Egyptians actually built an entire ceremony around exactly this idea. And it's the one I mentioned at the very beginning. In Egyptian belief, when someone died, their heart was placed on a scale. On the other side sat a feather, the feather of Ma'at. If your heart was lighter than the feather, you moved on. If it was heavier, a creature called Ammit devoured it on the spot. For years, this gets explained as a simple morality test. Good people pass, bad people get eaten. End of story. But look closer at what heaviness actually meant in Egyptian thought. A heavy heart wasn't about being a bad person. It was about carrying unprocessed weight, guilt, grief, rage, regret you never dealt with while you were alive. In other words, the test wasn't were you good or evil. It was, did you carry your Isfet with you, unexamined, all the way to the end? So why does this matter? Because thousands of miles away, in ancient Greece, people were obsessed with a version of this same test. Except they made you take it while you were still alive. Orpheus walked into the underworld to bring back his wife. Odysseus had to travel there to learn how to get home. Persephone was dragged into the underworld and came back changed, ruling half of it. Even Hercules' final labor was to descend into the land of the dead and return. There's a name for this pattern. It's called katabasis. a descent into darkness that the hero has to survive before they can come back transformed. Here's the part almost nobody connects to real life. These myths weren't really about geography. Nobody thought you could dig a hole and find Hades. They were maps for something internal, a descent into the parts of yourself you've avoided, so you can come back changed. But here's where things get interesting, because this exact pattern is playing out in your life right now, whether you've ever read a single page of Greek mythology or not. Think about the last time you felt a flash of jealousy you immediately felt ashamed of. Maybe a friend got the job, the relationship, the body, the life you secretly wanted. And in that split second, before you could stop it, you felt something ugly. Most people do exactly one thing with that feeling. They slam the door on it. I shouldn't feel this way. That's a terrible thing to think. And the feeling gets shoved into a room in the back of your mind. The door gets locked, and you walk away pretending it's not there. But that room doesn't stay empty. Every uncomfortable feeling you refuse to face gets stored in there. Old anger, grief you never finished, desires you were told were shameful. And just like Isfet, just like the underworld in those Greek myths, it doesn't disappear just because you're not looking at it. And this is where most people make a mistake. They think the goal is to get rid of that room entirely. Here's what actually happens when that room stays locked forever. The feelings inside it don't go quiet. They start leaking out sideways, usually disguised as something else. Ever notice how the people who are harshest about others being lazy are often terrified of resting themselves? Or how someone who reacts explosively to being told they're wrong might be someone who was never allowed to make mistakes growing up? That's projection. It's what happens when your own shadow gets pinned onto someone else, because it's easier to be angry at them than to admit that feeling lives in you too. This is the real cost of never doing any shadow work. Not that you become a bad person, but that you spend your whole life reacting to your own buried feelings as if they're happening outside of you, instead of inside. Now this next part might surprise you, because facing all of this doesn't mean giving in to it. Shadow work doesn't have to mean some elaborate ritual. It can start with one honest question, asked regularly. What do I judge most harshly in other people? Write down the first 3 answers that come to mind, without editing them. There's a good chance whatever you wrote is something you're either secretly afraid of becoming, or something you were never allowed to be. That's your shadow, right there on the page. The goal isn't to become that thing. Remember Motivational Fed. The goal isn't for chaos to win. The goal is to stop pretending it doesn't exist, so it stops running your life from the shadows, literally. That's the entire ancient idea, dressed in modern language. Face it, weigh it. Don't let it control you, and don't pretend it isn't there either. So here's the real takeaway. Your shadow isn't the enemy, and it never was. It's the weight on the scale that decides whether you walk through life light, or carry every unprocessed feeling straight into your future. The ancient world didn't fear the dark side of the psyche. They built entire belief systems around learning to face it. And that's the answer to the question we opened with. The scale was never testing whether you were good or bad. It was testing whether you'd done the work while you still had time. If this kind of thing fascinates you, I've got another video on this channel that digs even deeper into how ancient myths map onto modern psychology, and it connects to everything we just covered. If this helped you see your own emotions a little differently, hit like so more people find it, and subscribe if you want more of this. I'll see you in the next one.